For tonight's episode, we delve into thought, a deep dive into a favorite, the park we call EPCOT. This is where the mind meets the magic. We dive a little deeper every time. Theme parks, cruise ships, and travel. If you don't listen, it's a crime. Tonight we pose the question: what if Walter lived to see? Experimental prototype city of tomorrow come to reality. A city at Disney, functioning and real, living inside the park. Just how would that feel? This is where the mind meets the magic. We dive a little deeper every time. Theme parks, cruise ships, and travel. If you don't listen, it's a crime. Tonight we pose the question.
Hello and welcome to Mousekast Live. This is episode 61 and we are live talking about EPCOT tonight. So for those of you who are familiar with the Disney Plus Marvel animated series, What If? We are going to be talking tonight and doing our own version of What If. So the What If premise basically poses a question and says, what if something in the timeline changed? How would that impact the rest of the timeline? So we're going to kind of play the same game with the Disney version. What if Walt Disney had lived to see EPCOT, the city, constructed and opened in 1982? We'll start with a few of Walt's own words. EPCOT, the experimental prototype community of tomorrow. EPCOT will take its cue from the new ideas and new technologies that are now emerging from the creative centers of American industry. It will be a community of tomorrow that will never be completed, but will always be introducing and testing and demonstrating new materials and new systems. And EPCOT will always be a showcase to the world of the ingenuity and imagination of American free enterprise. So tonight, our cast is putting together their versions of what EPCOT would look like, not when it opened in 1982 as a city, as we are proposing What If, but going forward in time to 2035 and the 50th anniversary of EPCOT, the city. So that's our What If tonight. And we hope that you will join along with us and share your thoughts. So without any further ado, we're going to open it right up to our cast. And we're going to start off with Hawk. So Hawk, what if EPCOT, the city, was built?
So I took a couple unique perspectives here. I know everybody's going to do their own thing, but I was curious, like, what would the living situation look like? What would the cost be? Where would you be in paying rent? Or, what companies are going to be available for you to work at? If it's a functioning city, it's got to bring employment. It's got to bring commuting structure. You've got to have grocery stores and availability. And you already have the amazing restaurants and bars. I don't know if you can afford to dine at them if you're living near them, but it's an interesting concept. And if you go back to when EPCOT was founded and you actually start to analyze the cost at that time, apartments were in the range of $300 a month in the early 80s. You could find a reasonable apartment for about $300. I know, Chuck, you remember when they were even cheaper than that. And, we
lived back when we were trying to,
exactly. I remember when we had to build the lean-tos we lived in, the lean-tos, it was tough. But rent was about $300. With 50 years of inflation and cost improvements and everything else, and you think about the fact that Walt's original vision for EPCOT was to hold around 20,000 people. So 20,000 people residing in a city. It's a, small town, in the US, decent downtown area, obviously, going to be a little more expensive to live in the center of town. So if you account for inflation, you'd probably be paying somewhere between $3,500 and $5,000 a month to live in an apartment right in the center of Epcot. So you need to be able to make a significant amount of money, because if you're supposed to, by cost standards, spend 25% of your monthly income on rent and you're spending $5,000, you got to be making $20,000 a month to live in downtown Epcot. What are you going to do for work that's going to give you that kind of income in Florida? Well, I can tell you it's either drug dealing. No, I'm just kidding. That's a joke, people. That is a joke. In reality, you've got to work for very high-end technological companies.
Or you have to be a lawyer to pay for Hawk's legal
Correct.
bills.
My lawyer would make that. He'd be living right in the center of downtown, thanks to me. But you have companies like, for example, great additions to Epcot would be Tesla, Google. You start getting into some of the high end now with AI. Some of these companies that need mass banks of servers to process all this information and do things. You bring some of these computer and software firms in. I think you'd have the ability to create enough income that you could justify that. Also, with that 50 years of time frame from starting at 20,000 people, right now you'd be upwards of probably about 100,000 people by estimation on growth of an average living area. So you're talking 100,000 people living outside within the confines of the park that is now a real city. They're not going to be able to afford to work security at Disney. They're not going to be able to afford to work as ride attendants, not to live in the city of Epcot. But I think you can bring enough career-based positions in, you can justify it. So that was one of the points I wanted to make that I thought was just really interesting, to analyze the cost factor and what it would take for a salary to be able to afford to live in Epcot, the prototype community of tomorrow. So
there you go. So taking a look kind of at who would live there. So, all right, Mike, your views, Epcot, the city in 2035.
Mine is almost a different perspective. I didn't even factor in cost because Walt, he didn't really care about the cost, right? It was more Roy. So for his vision to come true, we would keep the countries, but in order to live there, I feel like they should model like the apartments and the homes after what it will look like in the actual countries. So it would feel like very unique. Like if you think like St. Augustine, Florida, right? Like it's very Spanish, and when you're walking down the main strip, you feel what the Spanish homes used to look like. So like that would kind of be my vision for Walt, and like Mexico, and then we would go to Norway, and kind of how, and then kind of what Hawk was saying is that you need a grocery store, right? So I'm gonna plug Publix because that's a staple of Florida, and you need to have a Publix. And then for transportation, because you need to get around, because if it's a big city, you're not gonna be able to walk it. I would feel like he would want a train system because he was obsessed with trains, right? Like he really loved trains. So instead of like cars or walking, there would be a short train system that would kind of take you around to the different countries, take you to from the city life to the suburban life, kind of thing. And then I gotta look at my notes real quick. And then you would want like other things to do that are somewhat cheap, and kind of to Hawk's point, it wouldn't be, if you worked there, you wouldn't get a lot of money, but it would be a good job. They would have like a movie theater, but they would only show Disney movies. Like, because it wouldn't make sense to show any other movies, because it's obviously Disney. And then like maybe have a theater type of place, like, you know, that would put on musicals or plays. So it would be it would be a pretty progressive city. And then another point would be, instead of having all of the countries, maybe keep a few and then have like alternating countries. It would be possible. It would be hard, but it would be possible. And that would generate a lot of guests to come because they would want to see, oh, there's a new country. Let's go see what they have to offer. It wouldn't be like, oh, it's the same thing. Well, we're okay. So like if you guys have ever been to like New Orleans, like it's a little big city, and that's kind of how I would vision what Epcot would look like.
So, Mike, I have a question for you on that note. You're speaking about, now we're building an actual city, so interchanging countries would be a tough sell. All right, because we're building a functioning city, but keep in mind we're building a city. Cities expand, so I think your idea of bringing new countries or new neighborhoods that are based on countries is definitely a feasible thing.
Yeah,
do you think that would work better in that concept?
Yeah, I was looking more towards that concept. Yeah, you just kind of worded it better.
Okay. No, I was curious. And guys, tonight as we do this, I want to make sure if you're watching along, feel free to comment and share thoughts. And if you're another cast member that wants a little more clarification as to somebody's ideas, jump in and ask, because this is where we're really diving into some cool stuff. I love the fact that we're all thinking about how to make an actual functioning town and what Walt would have thought, what Walt would have done, how it would have worked. Yeah. There's a lot of logistics behind city planning, so we're diving into a realm we're not real familiar with as theme park goers. So definitely jump in and talk to people about what their ideas are, because I think that's a phenomenal idea, Mike, is bringing continued countries in. You know, I mean, as it was designed, there were several countries that were supposed to be in Epcot that never came to fruition. So
that being Epcot the park. And for those that are listening and watching here, we told the cast blue sky. There are no limitations at all, so they can follow along to some of the original blueprint, for lack of a better term, of what Walt Disney laid out in the Florida project, or not. So they could go all whatever direction they wanted to go. So Natalie, you're up. Tell us about Epcot 2035.
Well, Chuck, the first thing that popped in my head was the scene from Iron Man and Tony Stark at like Stark Expo. That was the first like big idea, but we're not going to go there. But if they're going to have a big celebration, it would be like a Tony Stark big spectacular type thing. So I looked at Walt's like original plans, and I kind of like, with being in a similar size town itself, my town's like 40,000. So like the whole 20,000, not totally out of the realm of possibilities of figuring things out. But like, obviously, like my whole thought process was the simple, like main things that would need, like the transportation. I could see, like Mike suggested, a train station, like a train system, but also kind of incorporating like a people mover type thing of that kind of a system going from one section to the next, because in the original plan, it was like one big circle. So then when I started planning it out, I was kind of thinking of more of what Epcot looks like now, which is almost two gigantic circles with that lake in the middle. And if there was some sort of large body of water, there's a whole nother system. There's a whole ecosystem, plus, you know, ways to have like recreation and having a small boat system, kind of like the friendship ferry that's like, or the friendship ferry that's there. So like, I kind of like used like what is now and what Walt thought of and kind of like mash the two together. So obviously, like what was being said, we would need recreation. I'm big on a dog park because I'm a dog mom. So I got to have that. The school system where there needs to be maybe just 1 or 2 broken up schools for the whole entire community. And housing, you're going to have different types of housing. You're going to have maybe some low and high rise buildings. There could be subdivisions for families. And if we're plugging some favorite things that needs to be in there, I'm plugging Wawa because that's my favorite thing in Florida. Gotta have my coffee.
And Wawa is not a Florida thing.
I know it's not, but it's the only
I lived
place
in Delaware and it was Wawa. And then when we drove down, like living in Delaware, I was like, oh my God, they have a Wawa here. Like it's a
like
it's like a Delmarva thing.
Yeah, Wawas are all over the place here in Virginia.
Try having a Wawa that's about a mile away from your place.
Love that idea.
And I think they're going to have a Buc-ee's soon. Aren't they building some Buc-ee's? I know they're starting to build them along the way. That's the Texas version, which is much bigger.
Oh no, there's Buc-ee's are coming too. That's a whole different deal. That's a
the
different
Wawa
mascot we don't want to get into.
That one's for Ty.
Yeah, that one's for they're building.
That's like 15 Wawas in one, though.
It is
a little different.
Natalie, Pluto is super thankful of the dog park idea, though. Very appreciative.
Yes, Pluto definitely agrees. So, all right, Anne-Marie, you're up. Tell us about your EPCOT of 2035.
First, I just have to say, when I was pointing earlier behind me, that is New Orleans. So when New Orleans was being mentioned, that's why I was pointing behind me. This is a map from New Orleans around the time Walt Disney was designing, and thinking of EPCOT. This is one of the original maps. My husband's from an old New Orleans family. So anyhow, that's why I was pointing back earlier. But some thoughts I had. Transportation, one of the things that I thought was really advanced at the time was Walt was talking about air travel. And there was some talk between having some local, having smaller airports from community to community, which I thought was really cool and advanced. And then I started thinking about, we all know that 20,000 number. And living in a town where Universal Kids, which is where I live, is being built, and they're actually building right around where Universal Kids is, and PGA headquarters is now in Frisco, Texas too. They're building an area called the Fields of Frisco, which is where PGA is and where Universal Kids is building. And they're actually building very similarly, from my understanding, what they've been talking about, that kind of like Walt's vision, where they're building this kind of self-sufficient area. And it's going to be supposedly in part of the plan, like you've got all the neighborhood, they're trying to get higher education in there. They're trying to get higher end hotels and stuff that aren't necessarily part of the Universal brand, that are like they're looking to bring in different brands. And I thought that was interesting because there's a lot of similarities. So when I was thinking of my ideas, I thought about like Walt's original vision was very almost like it was self-sustainable and it was on its own, and that sounds great. But then I was thinking about, like, remember how COVID was great for like the first 2 weeks, and then afterwards it was like ready to go back and be around. And so then I was thinking, like, I don't know that if I were to build one today that I would want it all, only the Disney movies, only, this self-contained area. I like that mixed branding and that mixed community idea that is actually going to be built right in my backyard and fairly soon. And I'm interested to see how that comes to fruition. And they're talking about having some of their own bio, growth, which is similar to EPCOT, which I think with the way we've gone, and it was very advanced from Walt's time in today's world with, all the infectious outbreaks and everything. I think we're going to be seeing a lot of the stuff he was talking about, and a lot of the stuff that they're doing in EPCOT right now with, the biodome and the growing of the own plants. And I think no matter what we do, no matter what size we do, no matter what branding, I think the technology that we have there and that Walt was bringing with that would be really critical. And somebody who tries to eat healthy minus my Mickey Mouse ice cream bars, which I cannot grow, or I would. That is personally, like, those aspects I'm super interested in. I'm not sure I'm super interested in being in 100,000 person, no matter how much it costs, or 20,000 person. I think I'd like to be able to leave. Maybe if there was a way to be part of the community, but live like 5 miles out, but like have an association membership. Like, I think maybe that would be good for me, kind of like the social membership of a country club versus the full membership.
And Marie, I don't think we're forcing anybody to stay here, though. Like, it's no different than living in your own town. It's not like we're jailing you just because it's Disney. You do have freedom here. So it would just be like living in the upscale area of downtown in your own town, or picking to live outside the town, as Natalie said, in a subdivision or in a, like localized area. Or as Matt brought up, like getting into those cultural and diverse communities and subsets outside, where you might have that ability to have the Italian neighborhood, the Chinatown, the Moroccan area,
the various cultural areas.
Other places.
Yeah, that would be super cool if you could go and do like those little cultural. I mean, think about, kind of like drinking through the world in EPCOT today. Think about like on a Saturday afternoon eating and going through the different, and if it were close by, I think that would be amazing.
Well, and Walt talks about this too. I'll go back to his original words that later on in his Florida Project film, he says, everything in EPCOT will be dedicated to the happiness of the people who live, work, and play here, and to those who come here from around the world to visit our living showcase. And so even all the way back when Walt presented this back in the 1960s as an idea, he had that concept, Anne-Marie, where this wasn't just about people living in EPCOT, but people coming to visit EPCOT, be it short term, or maybe they are a visiting artisan, or a visiting expert, or a visiting professor, or something along those lines. So
and Chuck,
a number of different options.
And Chuck, to your point with that, I think one of the things that's very interesting in this whole concept is, you're essentially eliminating EPCOT, the theme park, and creating
that's correct. EPCOT, the theme park, we know is gone.
So
we're not gone. Never happened.
A functional city. So from a tourism angle, there's a whole different conversation, because if you have 100,000 residents of EPCOT that actually live there, you're still going to wind up with millions of people annually visiting. So the tourist economy is going to contribute to the sustainability of that city if it's done right, because it still is tied to a Disney idea. It's basically essentially a successful and larger version of what Celebration was designed to be, but creates it in a realm where it's directly on Disney property. It's a much larger and functioning concept. And I think it also creates its own economy. You have to talk about things like currency and other things. Like, if it's so far advanced, like what Walt envisioned, it's probably, you're paying with cryptocurrency. You're going to have the ability to, a cashless society is probably in place there.
Well, I'm sure by 2035, yeah.
Yeah, and you're not going to have the transportation issues, because there's not going to be enough space for a lot of vehicles or cars. Those would be out in other areas or external parking garages. You wouldn't be able to have it that condensed. So there's so many aspects of this that are so cool to dive into and think deeper and deeper and deeper. And I just think the whole concept is really, really incredible when you start diving down that rabbit hole, how far you can go with all this.
Well, and already we have heard so many different kind of viewpoints of it. And so, Ty, I'm really
100%.
excited to hear your viewpoints and your thoughts on Epcot, the city, in 2035.
Well, the first thing that caught my eye when I was looking up information about this is the fact that Walt wanted all the traffic to go underground, and I would build that in. I would build the underground road system to I guess to protect nature, to keep everything looking nice, but be a lot easier instead of having a lot of the traffic upstairs. Have traffic underground, you ain't got to worry about it.
Okay, Ty, I'm going to ask a question because I'm going to play some devil's advocate right now.
I was going to say I'm going to save it because I have thoughts on transportation a little bit, so I'm going to hold on that. But yeah,
how are you going to put it underground? Just because the reason I say that, Ty, just for clarification for you, Epcot has a huge sinkhole right in the center of it. And there is unstable ground there. And Florida has an exceptionally high water table. So I'm just curious to what your thought. You can make this up, but I'm just curious to how you would present. Would you create a floating underground tunnel? Like, how would you do it? Because I believe it's the Netherlands right now, are literally building a submerged floating highway. So it is under the water, but free floating at some points to be able to have motion with water. How would you do it at Epcot?
I would borrow what they're doing over there, but I would also, being a former oil-filled trash pipeline guy, I know that they can. I know how they can bore down and go underwater. So I would follow the pipeline construction concept.
Okay.
But also keep in mind that you're right. This technology is being improved every day, and I would be more than willing to borrow what the Norwegians are doing with their free floating underground highway too. So the next thing I thought about was taking the stage, the music stage at American Adventure already, and me and Mike discussed it. So I kind of borrowed it from him. Also, making it into a bigger stage, into more of an amphitheater type thing, to bring in bigger music acts, and you can use the stage for outdoor plays as well. And then every town has to have a gas station. And I'm sorry, we're bringing Buc-ee's to Disney.
Here comes the cultural clash.
Here comes. I mean, who wouldn't want to see Bucky the Beaver with Mickey ears on?
Hey, Ty.
So Ty, wait, I got to jump. So Ty, are you suggesting that Disney actually buys Bucky because, of course, Disney does like to purchase IP? I mean, just saying.
Yeah, yes, I'll be willing to accept, as a Texan, Disney owning, buying the competition and owning Buc-ee's.
But is it an all EV Buc-ee's station? Is it all EV, or is there going to be gas?
There's going to be gas.
Are you kidding? He's a Texan. There's oil in there.
We believe in oil and gas in Texas. So yes,
Mickey will say, "Dig, baby, dig." Drill, baby, drill.
Exactly.
Drill, baby, drill for the transportation and the oil, right, Ty?
Exactly. But yeah, don't get me wrong. I know the hippies out there going to want their electric vehicles. So
it is the prototype city of tomorrow. Just a reminder.
Hey, if my small town of 8,000 people, Buc-ee's can have electric chargers, then they can have them in Disney too. But
fair enough.
Yeah, I mean,
all righty.
I
All
just
right.
want the pork sandwiches.
There you go. All right. So Natalie, I'm very, very, or Megan, I'm sorry. I'm very, very sorry. You have to follow this.
I was gonna say I don't think I can follow this, but I'm gonna head back in Hawk's direction to this idea of housing and the finances, because I'm gonna assume that something that wasn't even being floated around when Disney was talking about all this eventually did in fact come to fruition, and that is the college program, because that is a massive source of cast members. And if you need people to stay in kind of lower cost, if you need to keep those apartment buildings lower cost, as you know, prices do go up over 50 years, you put the college program kids in those high rises. And then they're already on property, and you've got people movers, monorails. I think the Skyliner definitely would have been built by Walt. And so you've got those mechanisms ready to take them. I'm also going to assume that we still end up with MGM, Hollywood Studios, and Animal Kingdom and your water parks. So we're still going to blow that out, even if you lose a little bit of possibly the international students that we see, because you don't have the different pavilions as we have them today. And in that same vein, an industrial park was a huge part of that, with those labs that Walt said, companies would be working on their newest inventions and possibly even outfitting the apartments with some of those brand new inventions. Every year out in Vegas, out in January, is the Consumer Electronics Show. And companies, big, small, brand new to everything, they take whatever their invention is and they go and they showcase it there. And so I see the industrial park of this being something where you've got maybe some, smaller businesses, some startups that have really great tech ideas, maybe visiting in these labs and showing off, because the idea was that some of the tourists coming through EPCOT were going to get tours of the industrial park. So what are they seeing? They're seeing maybe Apple is there and Google and Sony, and they're building out, their latest and greatest, and they're showing that off like we now see at the CES show every year, but possibly some startups as well. And you've got kind of companies rotating in and out of that industrial park in different labs. So maybe some of those visiting scientists and visiting inventors, they're being put up in some of those apartments as well, and that's set aside. Walt was always big into always learning something new. So you've got the industrial park, you've got the college program. Is it possible that instead of just hiring college kids to work behind the register at the stores at the parks, oh, wait, now you have the opportunity to do some sort of short-term internship with some of these big companies who are also online, and really leaning into that education piece of that Walt always loved. And you've got college kids who, could probably use some college credit if they're down there. I got none for the 6 months that I spent at Disney. It's worth it, but still, And so you're kind of, Walt would have, I think he would have seen some sort of connection there with the learning and the invention that is inevitable with the kind of city that he was envisioning. So those two things I see very closely tied together with this city.
All righty, Matt, EPCOT 2035.
Going second to last, most of my ideas have already been discussed. So thanks for that one. So
I've still got to go. You're not last.
I said second to last. Hawk was dancing around a bunch of my ideas. I'm just like, come on, Hawk, really? So when I try to stick to Walt's blueprint for EPCOT, and kind of challenge myself to see, if it obviously it was going to change, but at the same time, I wanted to see if I could figure out how the tourism we can continue to grow with Walt's idea of a community that was based on its residents and taking care of those residents first, and then expanding technology to the rest of the world. So the first thing I thought of was, since most of the residents were going to be working in between the industrial park and within the center of Epcot, and I believe Hawk had mentioned like cost of living at these places, some of the things that people need now, they wouldn't need at Epcot. So realistically, you probably wouldn't need a vehicle, because between the people mover and the monorail, you can pretty much get anywhere. You can go shopping, you can go to the grocery store, you can go to what was going to be Magic Kingdom, And in his video, Walt was pretty much saying cars are going to be used to basically go away on maybe like on a weekend trip, and go outside of the city. So electric vehicle, if you even need one, maybe you just don't feel the need, or hey, we still have Uber and Lyft, so a couple bucks take me there, and I don't have a car payment, multiple hundreds of dollars a month. You can save money there towards the rent piece. So then I was thinking, okay, so I go to EPCOT and okay, I'm going to go and see maybe there's certain buildings I can go and see what they're working on at the time. Like it could be a new with the thought of self-driving cars, what advances have been made. I mean, maybe that's a thing right now, with Walt wanting to have technology be a forefront in improving people's lives. Maybe we're farther along in that aspect of self-driving cars. Or it could be living with the land. What it is now, they're still figuring out different ways to produce fruits, vegetables, stuff like that. So there could be an area where they're kind of showcasing what they're working on and stuff like that. But how are you going to continue to get like Florida residents and AP holders that go multiple times a year to keep on coming back? Because there's no real like attractions at this city. You might have like a theater, or you have the shopping and stuff like that. But to me, Epcot basically turns into like a glorified like Disney Springs at this point. It's shopping, it's restaurants, there's some entertainment, there's maybe more lodging and stuff like that.
And that's what will keep people coming back, though. To be honest, Matt, it's
Right.
they have quality food there, and as a Floridian now, I can't stand strip malls and like everything's the same and it's all chain restaurants. So the more individuality they can bring, and if you have neighborhoods with cultural places and they open cultural restaurants in those neighborhoods, like you're gonna bring people. I'm dying for good Chinese food, good Italian food, good pizza. Like I would love a great pizza place in Florida. They're hard to find. They're out there, but they're rare to find. So like Epcot, in my opinion, has the ability to be that centralized hub similar to a city like New York or Boston or Chicago that has districts of dining. And that definitely would bring people in from all over this state, especially if they can get a little taste of home within a 30-minute, 40-minute, hour drive from where they are. So you bring up some great points, though. Like I really love where your mind went with that, because you bring up a lot of really good points on some of the concerns. And I think we'll dive more into this in the post idea chat a little bit, because I'm interested to see how we can combine some of these ideas to create a pretty awesome city that I think is already evolving just on what everybody's saying. What else do you have, Matt?
Those pretty much the highlights. I know as far as taking some current stuff, um, like a water park, there was talks of like a green belt essentially in Epcot with like fields and basically recreational items. But I think eventually, you're going to need a water park. It's Florida, it's hot. And once again, how are we going to drive more people to come here? Throw in basically a Typhoon Lagoon or a Blizzard Beach, move one of those in, and you'll get more tourists, more footsteps, and stuff like that. And then since there wouldn't be any real festivals, I was thinking you're kind of taking like a smaller version of maybe like a food and wine. And like you kind of said, like having different countries represented, but also showcasing like if you're growing food from like the living of the land, how they showcase that. And they will sometimes mention that at some of the kiosks when you do food and wine, like, hey, this was grown at here, like you go through the ride or at the different kiosks. So I think they would kind of also like take that on and be like, okay, we grew, these, whatever to put in this dish and stuff like that. So it helps showcase A, the technology, and B, hey, you get to sample, what this tastes like, and it's going to either taste either better, the same, or you might think it's worse. But even still, you get to experience that, what that new technology has to bring as far as that. So those are some of the other like smaller ideas.
So I'll take the reins on turning it over to our last and ever so humble options.
Okay, what have I got left to talk about here? All right, so when you think about Epcot, the city, it's huge in the fact that so much is in play. Before I get to mine, I would encourage folks, if you're either listening or watching, go back and really watch the Florida Project video. It's out in a number of different ways that you can see it. Just what Walt came up with. Yes, it's utopian. Yes, it's very blue sky, and a fair amount of what he proposed probably wouldn't be able to be pulled off in exactly the way they originally planned it. However, that being said, he came up with some absolutely brilliant ideas, and so I kind of started with that blueprint and then built upon it. And I really wanted to kind of focus in two different areas, and some have already touched on some of these. And I took a deep dive on transportation, and I took a deep dive on education. The original Florida Project, again, the video talked about a whole transportation network. As Ty mentioned, much of that would be underground, and in theory, that's a great idea. But as Hawk mentioned, the water table in Florida is just way too high to really make this feasible. Yes, I understand that it could be done, but this has to be feasible, and money becomes an issue. So with that in mind, it instead of going under, it's going over. And so the road systems that will be there, granted, they're limited a little bit. These would be a series of bridges that would provide through access for trucks, large-scale vehicles, and things like that, with a smaller separate network for some cars. And I'm thinking mostly the ability for cars to get out. As some have said, at Epcot, and this is Epcot, the city, transportation is thought of completely differently. Residents will probably have cars, but that's for long distance travel, for out of town travel, for heading out to somewhere else. Day-to-day travel is through a series of public transit systems. And again, this was one of Walt's original ideas. And I think that it carries through all the way to Epcot 2035, and in fact has expanded. So large people mover systems, kind of like a ultra modern version of a subway, much like what you would see. It's not like a monorail, but it's a large people mover that can handle. Think of it like a small, the ability of like a minivan or a van to be able to not only carry people, but also can carry items, parcels, and things like that. That goes station to station. That handles a lot of your inner city, inner community. I love Mike's idea of these various residential areas that are culturally based. You can still have that same type of people mover system that's carrying goods and large volumes of people to different places, while you still maintain smaller, more traditional people mover style systems to handle the inner city transit, to just get from here to there and across.
So Chuck, I have a question real quick.
Yeah.
Would that be like track based or conveyor based?
Probably maglev based of some sort. Think like the trackless system, the ride systems that we have right now, something along those lines, but obviously on a much more efficient and frankly faster method, so that you would be able to get around, but you're not necessarily limited to. And look, by the time we get to 2035, I mean, there could be the potential of something that's hover oriented. You never know. That's a little bit out there. 2035 is not that far away, but what's that?
Hoverboards? Not
hoverboards, but hovercraft of some sort. I mean, possible. This is Florida, by the way. They already have them. So, but also much like the original design for Progress City, there will be a monorail system, of course. And there'll be multiple monorail systems that are going to link up different areas. In fact, to Hawk's point, in 1982, when Epcot, the city, opened under our what if scenario, Epcot, the city, was going to be in the neighborhood of 20,000. But Hawk's right, and I kind of went the same direction. Growth does happen because in general, when you're doing city planning and things like that, you got two modes: you either grow or you die. There's no staying the same. That just doesn't work. It doesn't happen. And so there would be growth. And so I don't know if it would necessarily be 100,000 by the time you got to there, but I think knocking on the door of 100,000 without a doubt.
Chuck,
So
I'm going to be honest. How many fans, like, look, just take our screen. And if I said to you realistically, you can move into a city in the center of Disney and spend the rest of your life there.
Oh, yeah, it
One
would
of
be.
the most advanced cities in the world.
But
You would be like,
okay, hold on. Here's the but. Ever tried to move? Anybody ever looked at like moving to Switzerland? You have to be like accepted to be there. So I don't know that not necessarily everybody would be able to move to Epcot and live there permanently. I think you were looking at X in residence. So you're looking at artist in residence, engineer in residence, scientist in residence, various whatever in residence. A lot of that with
so you would
some
make
residents.
You would make it so that there were requirements that had to be met?
I don't know. I mean, that's I think that because the original intent was to be a center of innovation and all that, and to have people visiting and coming in and out. So having a permanent residence would be a little bit different. Keep in mind that in order to make any of this happen, the original concept of Reedy Creek has to have continued to go because there are so many issues that have to be worked around. But we would have multiple monorail loops. There'd be two. There'd be an inner city monorail loop that's kind of going not necessarily inner city, but like a beltway, and two loops running in the opposite directions, so that you've got like an inner, very similar to what we have road systems now in major cities. You have the inner loop and the outer loop. And as Epcot grows, by the time we get to that 2035, there may actually be a second outer beltway. So there's like the inner beltway and the outer beltway that goes, and again, back to Mike's point with these various communities, these cultural communities, they probably will be more on the outskirts than they will be towards the inner city. That may be where that second monorail runs around for even bigger mass transit. But then there's more, because the Magic Kingdom, and yes, the Magic Kingdom is there. It opened in 1971 as originally planned. Remember, Walt walked that land. He was ready, and it was in the original Florida project plans to have the Magic Kingdom there. So the Magic Kingdom exists and was built. And the second theme park, because Walt will revert back to what he knows best at times, will build the Animal Kingdom loop. He would build Animal Kingdom, because that was one of the things that he was really big about back when he did Disneyland and doing the Jungle Cruise. He wanted it to be live animals. And I think that Animal Kingdom would be something that would appeal to him. It might not be the AK that we know now. It might be more of a real, much more truly like an interactive zoo than necessarily the Animal Kingdom that we have right now, but it would be there. Monorail system that's monorail system number 2 and number 3. Monorail system number 4 is the Port Canaveral loop, because Walt was all about creating experiences. And so I think he would have done the Disney Cruise Line, but he would have developed a monorail that would have gone between the city of Epcot and Port Canaveral and back, because he would want to control that completely. And then finally, the 5th monorail line is the airport and rail terminal line. So Anne Marie mentioned this. Walt's original idea was to have a jetway at Epcot. All right, so let's go back to the 1960s for a minute. At the time, the downtown airport that served Orlando was the only airport that served Orlando. It's the downtown airport. Now it's known as ORL. Well, Walt had a plan for a major airport. Keep in mind that MCO, Orlando International Airport, does not exist at this time. It was actually built in 1981. With Walt's plan for a major airport, the EPO, or the EPCOT International Airport, took over, and that became the international airport to service all of the Orlando area. And it opened, I estimated it opened sometime in the late 1970s, a little bit earlier than when MCO, that we know today, opened up, and of course ORL would still be around because it's the civil and executive airport. But on top of that, high-speed rail service would be a critical part of all of this, because to the point that many of you said, we don't need cars necessarily. So by the time we got to 2035, high-speed rail was engineered, tested, and is actually developed at EPCOT, and EPO became the first hub. The EPO Airport Rail Terminal Rail Loop or Rail Hub became the hub for a nationwide high-speed rail network with major hubs in major cities and regional hubs in communities. And that's all. And again, that all became it happened because of the innovation and the design that happened at EPCOT. Because remember, this is a futuristic city. But then Megan talked about education, and I did want to get to education real quickly here. So Walt would have wanted even more. Remember, he was very big into Caltech and was encouraged his animators to be involved in Caltech. Walt was so big into learning that he would have wanted his own school, the University of EPCOT. And by the way, the mascot are the animators. It would have opened around, say, 1988, essentially as that East Coast version of Caltech, but with a twist. Several other major research universities would set up satellite campuses at UOE, and they would develop regional partnerships to tie into EPCOT's overall research and design function as a city of innovation. So you would have Notre Dame EPCOT campus. You would have James Madison University, go Dukes, EPCOT campus. You would have Stanford EPCOT campus, Harvard EPCOT. All of these different universities would set up smaller satellite campuses at EPCOT to work with their various research and design setups. And then finally, getting into education at the K-12 level, there would still be traditional, kindergarten education for those residents that are there and living at the EPCOT area. But then once you got past middle school, students would begin to segment into different areas for high school where the curriculum would be based much more on career pathways than traditional subjects. There's still standardized testing. Even in 2035, I have a feeling standardized testing is not going away. But most of the learning and the application will be based with a heavy focus on internships and apprenticeships. And again, it's that experiential learning that I think Walt was so big about, and I think he would foster that even more if we had a city and a place to do that. And again, there's so many things that we could talk about with EPCOT, the city. I kind of took a deep dive into two particular areas as we kind of look at this.
I think to your point, something that, like Walt would have been very big on with a futuristic city is the sustainable energy aspect. And when you combine that with the ability to have, on-site micro campuses of major contending innovation college programs, like the MIT and Harvard and things like that, when you start getting into, wind, solar, fusion, new technologies as they even progress further, because we're discovering new ways to create energy every day. I mean, there's more and more things coming out. I think you bring up great points there. Two things I want to ask. One, Matt, why do we need to stop festivals in EPCOT, the city? My town has festivals all the time. They shut down Main Street. They have all kinds of stuff going on the weekends. If we don't have a traffic issue, I don't see why we couldn't have festivals regularly.
I was going to say, absolutely. If anything, I think we have more festivals than we have now.
It's not so much stopping festivals. It's just the festival that we see now at EPCOT, like you're going around the world. It would just be a different it'd be a different format, I guess you could call it. So you're going to see, it would be more or less not like this, month long,
Why couldn't it be? I'm legitimately asking, why couldn't it be?
I didn't deep dive that far, so I.
No worries, man.
Listen. I'm trying to think of a legit reason, because it was more or less like it'd be a different. I thought of it as more, like I said, a different format. So it's not so much that it gets eliminated. It just it takes a different. There's a different approach to it, but how to do it, because what research I've done, there wasn't like a huge like aspect on like cultures in Epcot. There was some mention, but it was more just like, I believe Walt said, it was America kind of showing off in a way to the rest of the world. Like, hey, we're developing all these technologies. Let's show them off to the rest of the world. So not show off as in like, like arrogance, but just like, hey, we're developing all this stuff. We're going to start here and then show everybody else. So, but as far as like a world showcase and cultural, like a bigger like world feeling, I just didn't get that vibe from his original concept for this. So that's why I feel like, like the Food and Wine or like Flower Garden, there would be some aspect to it, but on a smaller scale than what we're used to as like a theme park feel.
And here's another question for everybody that we didn't touch on. Security and government. Who is the police department? One.
Well, I mean, I talked about it before. Reedy Creek has to stay around. It has to. There would be no other way for this to realistically happen.
Okay, so to your point with Reedy Creek, how do you govern a city that is controlled by a corporation?
I was going to say, Chuck already said that it was going to be very controlled on who gets to live there. So it's going to be perfect.
A little bit.
You're not going to need government.
I think it would.
No, you'll still need government.
Yeah, you will. No, you'll still need government.
You're not going to. People will be fine. They won't be crazy.
If you're familiar with the government world a little bit, you might have heard of some of these ideas of a public-private partnership, a PPP. I think that normally we see those in like construction projects or other smaller things like that are kind of these one-time things. I could see this potentially being the first PPP city where it's half government. There is a government body that's there, that's an elected body, but there's also a corporate entity, the business entity that helps fund and maintain, because it would be the whole financing and the whole concept of taxes and all that would probably be very, very different. That's all pie in the sky right now, because again, those are things that would have to have been figured out. And so I have the benefit of saying 50 years later, they've already figured it out. So it just exists.
Okay. On the fly, very quickly, we have about 3 minutes left. Okay. I want everyone, we're going to go around the horn. Would you live in Epcot, and give me your number one reason why you would? Mike, go.
I think I would live in Epcot because I would just never be bored. Like even the Epcot we have now, like there's always something to do no matter what. And the Epcot that we're all building, we had some pretty cool ideas. So I feel like that would definitely be a pretty fun city to live in, unlike Lakeland, which is not. So
okay. All right, fair enough. Natalie, what do you got?
I feel like kind of like what Mike just said, I would never be bored. There'd be always something to do, because if tourism is coming in, then I have the opportunity to take my tourism somewhere else because I'm already living all there. So I'm already experiencing everything. So I would probably love to travel more because everyone's coming to see me and where I live. So I'm going to go see where you guys are at.
Okay. Anne-Marie?
I mean, we've made this clear. There's not like a limit on my Mickey Mouse bars, right? So I'm in. And I don't have to, like, I will show up to Publix like I did to Sprouts the other day, and they're sold out because someone bought them all.
I was going to say, I think you would be safe that they would always be available in the grocery store inside.
I would need the Mickey Mouse diet plan, though, because of my unlimited ability to eat my Mickey Mouse bars, but fat and happy living in Epcot.
Megan, what about you?
I'm going to say yes. I'm going to go a slightly different route. I'm going to lean into the education piece here. as somebody who is raising 2 kids, and we're going to get ready in a couple of years to figure out, are we doing public school, homeschool, private school, whatever, living in an Epcot world where we know that Disney would prioritize that education piece, like a magnet high school kind of situation that Chuck was talking about, I think, sign me up, my kids. The only thing is, of course, that Walt was really specific. There are no retirees. You have jobs if you're in Epcot. So, if my husband ever got to a point where we were, I didn't have to work, then I'm leaving Epcot because I don't want to work if I don't have to.
All right, Matt, what do you got?
So I'm going to be the oddball, and I say I'm not living in Epcot. I think I want that element of surprise that Disney provides. If you go down every so often, it's like we do. We don't go every year, more of like an every other year or every 2 years. And there's usually something new, to experience. But I feel like if you live at Epcot, you're going to see it every day. Traveling into the hub or traveling to the industrial park, the same. It'll be like, oh yeah, we're working on this. Oh yeah, I've seen this. It's just the innovations that Epcot and Walt were trying to that Walt was trying to build around. If you see it every day, it's just like, yeah, okay, you just become like numb to it. So to me, I'm living somewhere else. I'm going to venture in and I want to see what progress has had been made. I want that element of surprise in a way.
Okay. Ty, what about you? Would you live there?
I'm a small town kid from a small town. Heck no. I do not like big cities. So,
because you just know there would never really be a Buc-ee's at Disney.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that too.
Ty,
what about you, Hawk?
I'm gonna go to Chuck first. I'm gonna save myself for last. So
okay, we'll go there. Yeah, without a doubt. This is, you think about the fact that Epcot, the not just the Epcot that Walt had proposed, but the Epcot that we collectively have built here tonight, it's a pretty daggone exciting place to be. I mean, think about all that is going on, and to be in the center of innovation. What we have created in the Epcot that we have kind of blue skied here potentially is the center of innovation, not just for the country, but maybe for the whole planet. And to be in the center of that, and maybe even, dare I say, have a hand in some of that, that's a pretty exciting thing to do. I mean, you want to be someone that makes a difference in your community, your country, and your world. What better place to do it than right here where it's all happening? So sign me up, like right now, I'm in.
Okay. So I am kind of in the school with Matt a little bit, to be totally honest, that Epcot's actually my least favorite park at Disney. So I am not an Epcot fan. However, I will say, based on the discussion tonight, what you're talking about potentially creating, I lean more towards Chuck's side after that. Because while I don't like the theme park, I love the principle of what it was originally designed to be. And I think that you were talking about what was Walt's vision to be the most technologically advanced city in the world. And when you think about places now, and you talk about or see videos of how people live in Shanghai or Tokyo and how they maximize technology, innovation, space, everything to create these amazing technological advancements, to be in a position where you, to Chuck's point, could be part of designing, implementing, and creating technology that changes the world landscape as we know it. Whether it be vertical farming, whether it be, the solar and energy aspects, the new innovations to the floating underground monorail 10 feet below the surface of Florida, Ty, that we're going to do. Whatever it be, those technological advancements to have a giant amphitheater, a concert hall, or festivals that take place in the streets of the city because there is no traffic. that are always ever present. You're all right. There's no boredom. There's no time where you feel lost, and you get to enjoy the beauty of Walt's vision while still enjoying theme parks 5 minutes away from the city you live in. I just think that would be absolutely incredible. I think we came up with some great ideas. I think the cast did a great job tonight with delving into what it could be, not just what it was supposed to be, but what else could it be? And I think one of the beauties of Disney is that he always saw what could be light years ahead of everybody else. And if Disney gets back into that visionary status, I think you're going to see great things coming. And I hope that continues to happen in the parks as we're starting to see happening now. But you guys, all great ideas.
Yeah.
I think we have a great place to live.
We come. I have to admit, this is a pretty
And Matt,
exciting.
you can stay with me when you visit.
Well, that's fine.
Sounds
If we let him in, the lawyers are already working on the Hawk exclusionary clause for Epcot. So we also want to hear though what you think. What do you think of the Epcot that we've collectively built? But also, what about maybe what did we miss? What else might be in Epcot? Share your thoughts on the comments, either on the video of this on YouTube or over on our Facebook page. Over on Facebook at facebook.com/Mousekast podcast. You can find us on YouTube at youtube.com/@Mousekast. Want to say a huge thank you to Mike, to Natalie, Anne-Marie, Hawk, Ty, Matt, and Megan for joining us tonight for game night. A reminder that we do a live game night every final Tuesday of the month. So we hope that you'll join us for our next live game night. And don't forget, we put out our podcast and video casts every Tuesday night, so be sure to join us for Mousekast. It's the podcast where the mind meets the magic. And so until next time, we'll see you.
These adventures come to close.